Welcome back to Master Mindset. Today we have a special guest, a registered clinical counselor who specializes in relationship, trauma, stress, anxiety, depression, and personal development. Personal empowerment. Welcome to the podcast, Esha Kaur.
Thank you for having me, Sunny. I'm really looking forward to this.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming down. Let's start off in the beginning, Esha. What got you into pursuing a career as a clinical counselor?
A few different things. I would say overcoming personal challenges and triumphing over them in life. That's a personal one. Working in education, working with children and youth, and noticing that they really were more than anything wanting to speak to somebody to feel better. Like, sure, we've got educators helping them academically, but as a youth care worker once upon a time, I noticed they would gravitate towards me just to talk about what they're feeling, what they're going through. So that sort of led me down this path of what other fields or what other jobs are like this where I could actually help people on like a deeper level, right? And so that led me to counseling, and then, one thing led to another.
Right on. So personally, you were mentioning that something happened personally as well.
Yeah.
Can we touch a little bit upon that? What you felt like that, that really gave you the energy and the power to move forward?
Yeah. Overcoming personal challenges, we all face challenges. So I've overcome my own personal challenges from an adolescent, and I had counselors in my high school, Princess Margaret.
Right.
Yeah, so
we went to the same high school. I didn't know that.
We did.
That's right.
Right.
Okay.
So two particular counselors come to mind who I am in touch with today.
Right.
And it was so eye-opening, as a Punjabi woman, having counselors bring me into their office, sit me down, and ask me questions that I'd never been asked before. And I know this may sound a little cliche, but if it wasn't for them, I probably wouldn't be here today.
Wow.
In many facets. So they really transformed and changed my life. And that stuck with me, that stayed with me. And as I was, continuing my own educational journey afterwards and, figuring out what I want to do, I was on a path to be a teacher. But I soon realized oh my gosh, I'm actually meant to be a counselor.
Wow.
And give back the same way.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, your story about, you mentioned as our culture, Punjabi culture, getting, I guess, help or care when you're going through a challenging time, it's kind of really difficult. You find that it's a cultural thing that a lot of times people will say, I mentioned this with a friend of mine as well, like they'll say things like banda bancha or do this, become a man and be a man and fight through it. And people don't go for the help that they need. So what do you think that's really holding people back culturally because of that?
I think stigma in our particular community, so we're referring to the Punjabi community, so you could be Punjabi Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, etc. Stigma is huge. Stigma is very powerful because it is connected and correlated with reputation. The loki ki koge, famous saying, right?
What are people going to say, right?
What are people going to say? And we are still stuck there. Sunny, I'm sure you have heard of stories, maybe you've even experienced things yourself personally in your family where something happens. Let's say somebody is struggling with substance use, or somebody has a mental health issue, or somebody even has diabetes, something that's so common these days. Most people in our community, you will find, especially our parents' generation, don't say anything. Keep this to yourself. Right? Because for some reason they believe that if the reputation is tarnished, well, there goes everything for us. So I really think it has to do with reputation at the end of the day. And of course, the stigma that certain topics are just not discussed amongst, our people.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, another topic that I find a lot of people, and culturally, and I can talk from the business standpoint or the personal standpoint, is death.
Yes.
They won't talk about it. Ida di galla nahi kari diya. Don't talk about it. It won't happen.
Yes.
People don't prepare for it either.
Yes.
It's a very interesting thing, especially as you get older in life. Do you find that a lot of people you work with find those challenges as well, like dealing with that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so my clients, and I would say across all demographics, right? I started off as an RCC in Abbotsford and White Rock.
Right.
So, Abbotsford, especially being predominantly South Asian, because I worked in a medical clinic. So that demographic, 100%, right? Experiences these issues.
Yeah.
But then once I moved my practice more west, and now I'm in downtown Vancouver and I work with all sorts of people from various backgrounds.
Right.
Even they experience it, whether you're Caucasian Canadian, right? Whether you're Oriental Asian Canadian. These communities also struggle with similar things, right? They don't want to talk about the tough stuff. And I think that's very much a societal problem right now. We have certain avenues, like look at what we're doing right now. This is amazing.
Absolutely.
Right? This is going to reach audiences. And there's more information available because of social media, etc. But still, regardless of however many videos a person might watch or however many podcasts a person may listen to, once they turn that phone off, right, and they go back to their regular life, for whatever reason, they're still quite reserved internally, and they are still to themselves. And there's so many, I can go down like a long explanation as to why this is, but I would say it's a societal issue. Societal meaning North American. I really think this is a North American cultural problem.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I guess we'll move to the next question, which is, when you mentioned that it's more of a North American problem, do you feel that mental health challenges are more prevalent today? And what do you think could be one of the major contributors to that?
I don't know if I can say that mental health challenges are more prevalent today, because that's hard to measure. Even clinically, it's really difficult to measure that. But what I can say is post-pandemic, right? So after COVID, we have noticed as practitioners that people are just generally more on edge. They're stressed. They are dealing with depression, and they don't know what to do. They don't know how to handle these symptoms and these feelings and thoughts that they're having day to day.
That's a really great point. It's almost like another pandemic in itself, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's. I can see that professionally as well. I mean, of course, I work in finance, so you see people's stress levels based off connected to their finances. Do you feel like a lot of people try to keep up with the Joneses in just regular society or even culturally?
That's a really good question, Sunny. So I would say the last 2 to 3 years in my work, so I've been working 6 years as a clinical counselor, so the last 2 to 3 years, I have started asking all of my clients how they are doing with their financial health. That's the term I use. So prior to this, there was four dimensions of well-being that I check in with on all my clients: physical health, emotional health, mental health, and spiritual health. It's post-pandemic that I've introduced financial health. So it's part of the check-in I do. And there's many reasons for that. On one end, as you know, being in the field you're in, it's really hard right now for a lot of people, right? It just is.
It is.
housing market, I'm not even going to touch that topic.
100%.
I don't have enough knowledge to, but I do know enough to say it's way too expensive.
Yeah.
Our salaries are not, matching the cost of living here, inflation, etc. Right? So there are people out there who are doing their very, very best, Sunny. I have these clients. They are struggling just to get by. These people are renting. They don't even have a house. They don't own anything. Okay. And they feel like they probably never will. But your question is more geared towards people who are, doing relatively okay, but it's not enough.
Yeah. It's not enough.
It's not enough. And I have clients like that as well. And I think what's happening is it's nothing new, Sunny. This has existed in our community since the beginning of time. Let's be real.
100%.
Specifically right now, I'm speaking to the Punjabi community, right? Our Punjabi community thrives on how big our home is. Where is our home located? What kind of gaddiyan are we driving, right? And this entire persona is pulling us farther and farther away from true purpose in life. So they get jaded. They get so confused in this state of trying to just obtain these materialistic things, and they forget what actually matters in life. So when you start to live solely to purchase, I don't know, whatever the most fancy vehicle is these days, which I don't even know what it is. But if your laser focus is, that's our next goodie purchase, that's what we're going to get, and then we're going to build this big house in whatever part of the city, you almost lose sight of what matters in life.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
And I sometimes wish I could just get our entire community into a room, a room that's big enough, and say, hey, have you guys just taken your shoes off and touched your feet to the earth and closed your eyes and taken a few deep breaths and asked yourself, what am I doing here? What is the purpose for whatever I'm doing?
Yeah.
Right? And I think purpose is really important. So if you are building something for your family, that's amazing. But if whatever you're building is a materialistic thing, and now you're spending valuable time away from the family, what is the point of this?
Huge point right there.
Yeah.
I think also, sorry to cut you off, but just to add to that, I feel like a lot of parents will sacrifice their time with their children and build a great house, nice cars, nice clothes, give them all the material objects that they require and they need, and then to see them participating in probably not so good productive activities, but we see nowadays in our community, challenging things with the violence and all that jazz.
Yes.
And many of these, not some, I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of these people are coming from very middle to upper class families, and they're pursuing these lifestyles. And I feel like a lot of times the parents are under so much pressure to buy the nice thing, to show the people that don't care, so their kids can have what they want, but then the kids aren't satisfied within themselves because they realize to get what my parents gave me, I have to put in X amount of hours and days and sacrifice. And they're like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially now. People are like, they're trapped now in finances.
And it's heartbreaking. And, so your question was posed to me in a way of like, why are people, kind of trying to keep up with the Joneses?
Yes,
and
that's right.
And my answer to that is, I think it's existed in our community for many, many years. I would say generations, maybe 2 generations, right? Coming to Canada and trying to show what we are capable of and what we can do, right? And the fark and the jealousy and the comparisons and who does the nicer, bigger wedding. And, these things, unfortunately, have been ingrained in some younger adults from their families.
Yeah.
So that's where I do give some grace. I love that word. I give grace to some of those younger couples I work with, right? Who come to me for premarital therapy. When they're talking about, okay, we have a problem. He doesn't want me spending X amount, but I want to spend X amount. And then you peel back the layers, you realize and recognize it's actually not just this young girl's dream to have this elaborate wedding. It's also pressure from the parents, which is really interesting. And I think that's a topic that we're not understanding as much, or we're not talking about as much, because right now these younger adults are getting a lot of the blame, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, if you are 30 plus years old and, allowing your parents to take a line of credit on their mortgage to pay for a $500K wedding, there's something wrong with that, right? But then there's also something wrong with those parents who are allowing that to even happen, right? So this is a community problem, Sunny. Community problem meaning it is an intergenerational problem. This is something that we have to collaboratively sit together and have discussions on and talk about, and realize that life is more than just checking off tick boxes.
Yep.
Right? And that we are going to get more out of living a more modest life, right? In a smaller home, and at least we're going to have more time together.
Absolutely.
Right? At least we're going to get to go travel together. I don't know many of these hardworking middle to upper class, whatever you want to call it, Punjabi families, to be honest with you, who make time to do family bonding and trips. I think that comes more third, fourth on their list. And again, this is my personal experience with the clients I work with, right? Their focus is on other matters. Their focus is on work, accomplish purchasing these things, then we'll have fun. It's almost putta.
100%. I love how you mentioned that, because it's all about the kawa at first.
Yes.
Show off. And it takes a large adjustment to realize, and I've gone through this myself as well, trying to buy nice things. And of course, we still do it. But what I realize is when I tend to buy something nice or fancy, it's great. The chase of getting that item is phenomenal. Once you get it, 3 or 4 weeks later, kind of loses its shine. You're like, why did I even get this? Now I'm with a payment, or I'm with this, or I bought it. Don't really care for it as much. However, we chase things so often in the possessions. What I also realized is to buying memories, like the trips you mentioned.
Beautiful.
Doing simple things like getting ice cream with your kid or your family or a friend, having a chat like this. There's so much more fulfillment in that.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you're still spending money on something, but this is just like, just to show other people, but this is for internal happiness.
Yes. And that's a really good point, Sunny. If purchasing a Dior bag gives you internal happiness, meaning it's going to last years and years and years, then of course do that for yourself. But if you're doing that because Falana Tinkana bought one and I want one too,
Right.
the intent is not right.
Right.
And that goes, oh my gosh, that is totally why we're seeing also young girls and guys doing these elaborate weddings that are outside of their reach.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's a whole topic in itself.
It's a great topic.
Yeah.
I mean, weddings, buying properties, we have conversations with people, and sometimes, we say, hey, what do you need the money for? What do you need? What do you want to buy the house for? Or, my so-and-so wants a big wedding, or my sister or brother bought a big house, so I have to buy a big house. I'm just like, what's wrong with your house? It's built 5 years ago. But I mean, it's just a very interesting thing. People position that in their minds on why to buy something.
Yeah.
And the houses are empty half the time.
Unbelievable.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, we talked about the finances being correlated. What are some common childhood traumatic experiences you see that many people carry over into adulthood that they should address?
Can you ask that question again?
Sure. I know it's a little bit vague.
Yeah. No, it's okay.
What about a different one?
Yeah.
They say when someone lacks purpose, they sometimes resort to self-sabotaging behavior that keeps them in a cycle. What are some common things people will do that keep them trapped?
That's a good question. Self-sabotaging behavior that I have noticed as an RCC is substance misuse, substance abuse, food misuse, and technology misuse. These are all escapisms, is what we call them, right? And today, people are overindulging in these or even other matters I haven't even addressed, right? Substance misuse. I'm pro legalization, but what we've seen and noticed now as clinical counselors, especially those working in addictions, that people are vaping 24/7, and a lot of them are vaping marijuana all day, all night. And the scariest population is the adolescents who are doing this. Right? And like their brains aren't even developed yet. But we won't talk about that. We'll stick to the adults, right?
Okay.
So these adults who are, trying to escape their reality, right? Through substances or through vegging out, right? You're sitting there, you're just Netflix show one after another, or you're on an app or whatever, YouTube, and you're just there for hours, right? Or gambling. That's because sports betting has become a big problem.
Really?
Yes. And then, of course, other technology addictions such as pornography. That's actually pretty prevalent too today. So these are all escapisms, and people are, instead of dealing with what's going on the inside, they would rather use these things to help them escape whatever is going on, because it's so much easier to just use that stuff and numb out day after day. Rather sit with what's going on, explore it, whether with a therapist or whether on yourself, by yourself. You can do that as well, and learn to regulate. That's all tough work. It's hard work.
That's so hard.
Right?
Yeah.
Who wants to do that when I can, walk 2 blocks and go get myself, some marijuana and completely zone out?
Totally. I mean, it's not sexy in a sense if you want to to dive deep into yourself and find out.
Right.
Because I think a lot of times you're not going to like what you see.
Right, Sunny.
And that's what most people, I feel like, because I've had to do so. I've been lucky enough to work on myself. Like I'm very grateful for that, because when you dive into yourself, you find things that you don't like, but then there's beautiful things that you do like. And if you have the right care from a professional, can guide you on how to deal with those issues.
Yeah.
You can, totally develop yourself. That's my opinion. I mean, can we add something to that?
You said something that's really interesting, and that's you have the privilege to do inner work. You are right to a degree there, especially if your inner work is being accompanied by the help of a therapist or a life coach. Not everybody can have free counseling or therapy or life coaching. The services cost money.
100%.
Right? So unless you have benefits, or unless you have the financial means to have that professional guidance, you're on your own.
Yeah.
And it is hard. It is not easy. If now, let's say there's a person who has had terrible childhood, and a childhood just filled with unfortunate traumas, right? No direction, no healthy guidance. What is that person to do? Where does that person go? It's really confusing here, even in BC. Like the services, and mental health support that supposedly are paid for by the government are not that easy to access. There's like so many hoops you have to jump through to get those services.
Really?
Yes, you have to have a certain income. Let's start there,
Okay.
right? And then there's wait lists upon wait lists. And you have to have referrals from doctors. It's just, and then you kind of sit back and go, let's take a moment and think about somebody who's really struggling, right? With their mental health or substance use or whatever. Where are they going to even find the energy to get those things in order?
Wow. I wasn't aware how challenging it is to go through so many different steps to get the assistance.
It is. It is challenging. And then, of course, we see a lot of our failed system right in front of our eyes. If you walk, down to Wally, you walk to East Hastings and many parts of Vancouver now, you see the failed system right there.
And I mean, this is happening, what you mentioned before, a North America-wide problem.
It is.
It's not just in BC or Lower Mainland or in Surrey or Vancouver. This is in Toronto. This is in California. This is in New York. I mean, all throughout the Western world, it feels like to me right now.
Yes.
I want to shift gears into relationships.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Let's talk relationships.
Yeah, let's talk relationships. A lot of fun there. So, I mean, in this day and age, I feel like, I'm going to read the question out properly here, have it worded properly.
Of course.
What are some of the main reasons marriages break down? And is there something most people can do if they're having a challenging time right now?
Okay. So personally and professionally speaking, I think one of the main reasons why long-term relationships or marriages break down or don't work out is because the couple stops being curious about each other.
Can you break that down?
Yeah. Curiosity is an extremely powerful component to a romantic relationship. Okay, if we think about the beginning of a relationship, why are the beginning of relationships so much fun? And why are they exciting? Because both individuals are curious about the other. You're in like investigation mode, right? You're like,
that's true.
Right?
Yeah.
What is this person like? What do they not like? You have their full attention and they have yours. Undivided. Usually for months, a year. After that, let's say you move in together, you get married, you're living together. There's comfort in that, right? Vulnerability shows up, which is beautiful. But unfortunately, a downfall is the curiosity just diminishes over time. So if couples can find a way to remain curious about one another, meaning their egos never come into play, they never feel like, oh, I know what he's thinking, I know what she's thinking, I know what he wants, or I know what she wants, right? Oh, she's doing this because blah, blah, blah. So you stay away from all of that and you remain curious, meaning, I wonder why he's doing that. I wonder what she's thinking. Right? So this is just an example of how curiosity remains and shows up in a relationship. And if it stays, the relationship survives.
So try to understand the other person's perspective in a sense?
Remaining curious about the other person's perspective.
Right. Okay.
Instead of assuming that you know what the other person is thinking and doing.
Nice. I love the way you said curious, because I was thinking curious can mean a lot of things because you're curious in a lot of ways.
I understand that.
Right? Yeah.
So remaining curious, but in a positive way is what I get what you're saying, but curiosity in a positive way.
Got it. Okay. So with relationships, there's a question I want to ask about that.
Okay.
You feel like a lot of people in this day and age, they tend to, I guess, sever the relationship too soon without trying the curiosity card?
That's a very good question, Sunny. And again, this is a question where I have to, as a clinical counselor, just say this first and foremost. If you are in an abusive, toxic relationship, that has to be monitored with a professional. So if you are dealing with abuse and toxicity and you're unsure whether it's something that's reconcilable, something that is, manageable, something that can be worked on, talk to a therapist, okay, first and foremost, and see what the professional thinks. Because when you're in this cycle of abuse, it's sometimes hard to think clearly and see clearly. Generally now, though, if you want me to answer this, yes, I do. I do think that couples who are not dealing with abuse or toxic cycles, they are calling it quits earlier than they should. And there's so many reasons for this.
What do you think is a couple of reasons?
I would say with the community and the populations that you and I are talking about, it's couples and people who are really hardworking, right? They're accomplished. These people are, they know what they want out of life, and they know what they want to give to another person and what they want to receive, right? So we have, again, I have to kind of make this an example, right?
Yeah.
So let's say we've got hardworking folks, kind of late 20s, early 30s, established, getting into relationships. These people have got to where they are because they didn't take shit, so to speak, from the world. Because if they took shit, they wouldn't have gotten to where they are.
100%.
But sometimes when you have that kind of an attitude and you bring that attitude into a relationship that is sacred, that is meant to be like treated with the most tender nature, we are forgetting the importance of compromising on some of our ways of being, right? So do you see how I didn't say compromising morals and values? Because you should never have to compromise those to be in a relationship. If you're compromising those, that's not a relationship for you, period, right? But our ways of being, right? Sometimes we get really stuck in our way of being. And if we have an inability to compromise, then almost any relationship will not work. It just will not. So lack of compromising and lack of prioritizing each other, right? Equal giving out too soon, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. It actually reminds me of another question I want to add into that.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times I've heard this in the past, relationships not going well, husband and wife, and they'll say, you know what, let's bring a child into this. That'll fix it.
Oh my gosh, that's the worst thing you can do.
That's very common.
I know it's common.
Right?
Yeah.
That impacts the child as well in the future. You ever see that actually working?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Yeah. Because it must be for a reason.
Yeah.
Why people say it.
Yeah. I have actually seen it work now that you bring that question up, and I saw it work in some really unfortunate situations. I worked at a private addictions facility for 3 years, a great facility in White Rock. And there we have men, because it was a facility for men, who are, they're on their last straw in many ways, shapes and forms. And, at the same time and the same end, they're, them and their partner get pregnant magically. Magically at the exact time when the person's about to just, fall off the face of this earth, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that child becomes this sort of symbol of hope and faith. And they can sometimes transform individuals and relationships. So I have seen it.
But it's a big gamble.
Thank you for saying that.
So, yeah.
Because it can do the opposite too. It can do the opposite, meaning, oh my gosh, I'm responsible for another human being. I don't even have my shit together. Me and my wife aren't getting along. We're fighting every day. Now let's bring in this third human. Oh, recipe for disaster.
And they run away, in a sense, from
Yeah,
their responsibility.
Exactly, because things become so difficult to manage. You're operating here. Both people are operating here day in and day out. And here we have this like precious human being, just like looking up at them for guidance and what is going on? What do I do? The child is processing. What are mommy and daddy doing? So the reality most of the time, Sunny, is that it's not a good idea to use a child as hope and faith, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
To restore a relationship or to rebirth a relationship. But have I seen it work in some really interesting situations? Yes, I've seen it work. I've seen it in the sense of what I said that, a gentleman I worked with completely changed his life around. It was like God sent. It was a blessing. And got sober, oh my God, in every aspect of his life changed. Worked on the relationship. Still work with this couple today. The child is like 4 years old now. So
wow. So it does happen.
It does happen. And I also want to say, I think a huge aspect though to why it worked here is because they had a team of professionals working with them.
That's a great point right there. Had the care, right?
They had the care. They had the money to get the care.
That's a ultimate thing here, and to get that assistance, it sometimes requires funds to do it.
Yeah.
They say comparison is a thief of joy. This day and age, do you feel a lot of couples compare their relationship with others?
100% yes. I think a lot of couples are comparing their relationships with other people, and I think a lot of individuals are comparing themselves with other people, period. And it is the thief of joy. If we are laser focused on what is, Tom and Jennifer doing, you lose sight into what your purpose is on this earth and what you want to accomplish in this life. Your laser focus just becomes, oh, I'm going to go check their Instagram. What are they up to? I'm going to go check their Facebook. Like, what's the latest that they've posted? Or whatever, And when your sole purpose is to live through other people, you are not living. Your living is now being determined by what other people are doing. And I think when you are a couple who's operating like that, it's going to come to bite you in the back. It will.
Creates probably, I'm sure it probably creates problems internally.
Yes.
That people say, oh, they have this, or we don't have that. How come we can't get this? Why can't she buy me that? Or why can't he buy me that? So then they build up this sense of my partner's lacking.
Yes.
Well, I'm lacking something.
Yeah.
It's probably really harmful for a relationship, I assume.
Very much so. There's unnecessary conflict that you are bringing into your relationship if you are doing that. Absolutely unnecessary. Life is so tough as it is, Sunny. Why do we need to do that? why bring in unnecessary additional conflict?
Okay, that's another point I want to make to that. Do you think people are addicted to drama?
Oh, that's funny.
Right? Because like, why are you bringing unnecessary outside stuff?
That's you know what? I don't know. I can't speak on this as a clinical professional, but I can speak to this, I think, just personally and just what I see generally as a counselor. I think some people are.
Yeah.
Is it weird to say that?
No, I don't think so.
I think some people are bored. And I don't mean to be passive aggressive by this comment, okay? Or demeaning. I think some people who lack vision, purpose, drive, ambition for whatever you want to accomplish in life, people who lack in those areas are bored people. Bored people do look for drama, whether it's on the internet, sitting there reading things, whether it's watching dramatic shows, to get excitement, or whether to cause drama in their life or other people's lives.
I was reading it with, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he mentioned that some people are clinically not clinically, they're wired that way. They look for those neurons that fire the same responses. So when they're not, everything's good, they're like, I got to stir some shit up.
Yes.
And it gives them that feeling of cortisol and all that, right? So
that's right.
He is
correct.
Yeah.
He is correct. And this is why, again, RCCs and counselors and therapists and psychologists will stress this over and over again. If you have the means to do therapy, please do yourself the biggest favor, invest in yourself, and go to counseling.
Yes.
It is the greatest gift you are going to give yourself. Sure, that sounds biased coming from me as a counselor, but let's suppose for a second I'm not a counselor and it's 16-year-old Esha talking. I didn't know really what a counselor was, but what I can tell you is from felt experience, counselors changed my life.
Absolutely. Well, let's break down the word counsel.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, in any business or enterprise, they're going to have counsel to speak with and connect with, to shoot ideas back and forth.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of high-performing entrepreneurs I know, they have someone that they connect with.
Correct.
They can pay, or it's through their network. But that gets built up over time. People that are ahead of them that have gone through some challenging times, or they have a professional like yourself that leverage someone like yourself to be able to articulate or put the thoughts that they have into a compartment and understand, okay, how I can move forward. I think a lot of times, like you mentioned, society will put us in a box like, oh, that guy's he needs help. Yeah. It's like as if we're all fixed.
Right.
We're all walking around perfect beings.
Nobody's perfect. No. I'm not perfect. I'm far from perfect, Sunny. Right. Yeah. And I think that's another interesting thing. One of my clients said to me, wow, Esha, I wish I could be a counselor. I would just have everything figured out. And I started laughing. I said, do you think all counselors have their lives figured out? I said, the best counselors have a counselor themselves. I'm one of them. Yeah. And I said, one of the best ways to, filter out which counselor to go to is ask them during the consultation, do you go to counseling? And if they say no, I would double think going to them as a counselor, because we all have inner work to do. The level of that inner work varies depending on where you are in your journey. Right.
That's a great point you made there. I mean, that's something I would never have known to ask my counselor. What are some things that you would say, 2 or 3 things, somebody, when they're trying to find the right fit, they should ask?
Okay, well, that's one question. Yeah. Do you go to counseling yourself?
Myself?
Do you go to counseling? Asking somebody, asking a counselor. Okay. Do you go to counseling yourself? Yeah. Okay. Number 2 would be, what are your areas of specialty? Because that really does matter if you're looking for something specific, and that counselor's area of specialties are totally different, right? And what would you do in a situation if you felt like you could no longer assist me or help me anymore? Because there do come times and moments in a therapeutic relationship where the work that you do with one counselor is kind of coming to an end. And there's not a lot of people that talk about this in therapy.
Yeah.
And it would be negligent for a counselor to continue doing work with a client when they know, okay, I think my work here is done for now. And I think it would be beneficial for this client to explore another therapeutic, modality or another therapeutic experience with a different kind of person.
So let's just say somebody's watching this right now,
Yeah.
and they're in that that phase. What are some things that they would know that, hey, maybe I'm at that stage now?
Good question. So if you're going to your counseling sessions and you're finding the counseling is becoming more conversational than it is therapeutic work as it was maybe in like the first year or 2 years of work. So if you're going and you're kind of shooting the shit with your counselor,
hey, what's up? How's it going? That kind of thing. Yeah.
That's a strong sign that maybe it's time for a change. However, I want to also add, I have clients who do that with me and they love it. But I've done my due diligence and I've said, hey, I want to check in with you. We've known each other for quite some time. We've done a lot of work together. And I'm noticing that our sessions are very conversational-like because we're not doing a lot of therapeutic work because we've done a lot of therapeutic work thus far. You've gotten what you've wanted initially out of our counseling. So how do you feel about this? So I check in with the client, right? And these clients have said, I'm aware of that and I love this. So I accept this phase that we are in and I'm not going to see you as frequently, but I do want to maintain this relationship with you because it's built off many years of therapeutic work. And I say, amazing. And I'm like, but if you ever want to try something else, try EMDRs, a service that I don't offer, please.
EMDR is again?
It's eye movement therapy that is for people who have like deep-rooted trauma. And it's a type of modality. It's where the counselors, they kind of guide certain eye movements like rapidly to help them release certain types of traumas.
Wow.
Yeah, interesting stuff, right?
Very
and so these are things that like I don't offer. I offer different things. And so it's okay to maintain that relationship. But if you, as the client, feel differently, right, then it is time to explore somebody else and see if you get something else out of it.
Great point.
Yeah.
I caught something in there where you said you've been seeing a counselor for a year or 2 years, right? You'll never know when your work is done. But do you think some people will say, I went for 4 sessions, I'm fixed?
Oh, do some people say that? Yeah, and they're not fixed.
There you go.
They're not fixed.
How long does it take?
That's a really good
how long
question.
does it not take? Like, for example, it's not going to take 3 sessions. It's going to take extensive work. What do you think?
Okay, so I will explain the way I conduct an initial assessment. And every counselor probably does something similar or something different. I'm not sure, right? Just depends on how they do it. But for me, in the initial assessment, we figure out together what the client wants to work on, what the client wants to focus on. So if the client is coming to me to work on early childhood trauma, that requires me to go way back with the client to do deep, reflective, tough trauma work. And that requires a quite a long period of time okay, in order to work through it efficiently and thoroughly, okay? And I'm transparent about that, Sunny, when I talk about it with the client in the consultation or in the initial assessment. So, okay, you're coming for trauma work. We're looking at easily 1 year of work to just dissect this fully and thoroughly and to make sure that you are safe and can function in society instead of me opening you up like, a can of worms and then just let you loose. I can't do that as a therapist. I have to make sure that the client is safe and okay and functioning.
Right. So sounds like what you're saying is when you're going through that discovery phase, there's going to be different emotions that your client's going to face.
Yes.
How can we prepare them to understand that there is going to be pain or challenging emotions, but after that, there is a light at the end of the tunnel?
100%. So the preparation, honestly, is done with the counselor. So that relationship with the counselor is a very sacred and powerful one, and they will hold the space for you. They will give you tools and tricks and healthy coping mechanisms as you're doing the work. And right now we're talking about trauma therapy, okay? Even if somebody was coming to, let's say, me for solution-focused work, meaning there's like a problem they're dealing with, okay, and it's like a relatively like short-term issue, that will maybe require 3 to 5 counseling sessions. So there actually are situations where somebody's coming for a particular issue and they want help with that. And so I know I'm kind of like answering your previous question.
No,
right
that's
now,
fine. It's fine.
But that is also something that is doable. It just depends, Sunny, what the person is coming for, right? And what can they do to prepare themselves? Not a whole lot, to be honest with you. Just show up.
Just show up and be ready.
I love this particular saying, come as you are. Come as you are. When you walk into the room of a therapist, you are in the best hands possible. So you don't have to prepare. You don't have to really think about it much. You let the therapist guide you.
Great point. I'm going to switch it over to relationships again now.
Okay.
So I have some single friends and colleagues and professionals that I know. I hear from a lot of them that dating is hard. Yes. Do you think there's too many options out there, or people are too selective?
Okay, well, that question I can answer just personally, based off what I've seen, okay? Because as a clinical counselor, I can't really say too much about that.
Sure.
Okay? So personally, I feel that it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, that people are accomplished. So we're referring to colleagues of yours or professionals. So I'm assuming they're probably in their late 20s, 30s, maybe even 40s. I'm not sure.
I mean, the range from 21 to 45.
Okay.
I'll give you an example.
Okay.
I think some of the people that I chat with, they're like, it's so hard now. Like, the expectations from the other side are here and I'm trying to build something. They want me to be already here when I'm just starting out. A lot of people aren't ready to go for the ride. I guess the mud in a sense. They want to see you at the end. So it's a lot of, I guess it ties back to culturally. They want to see somebody have checkmark all the boxes.
Interesting.
So they're finding it very challenging. At the same time, I'm hearing from the women's perspective as well that they're like, a lot of the guys don't give them that attention that they require. So they're very, ghosting. The ghosting culture.
The ghosting culture.
Let's just talk about the ghosting culture. Okay, that's probably even better.
Now that's something I can speak to as an RCC because I've actually had lots of clients ghost and then be ghosted. And I've had to talk to...
The same people?
No.
The ghosters. Okay.
So I've had clients who are ghosters.
Yeah.
I've had clients who have been ghosted.
Okay.
So I have experience working with the two opposite ends.
Wow.
And very interesting perspective I can share on this is the individuals who like to ghost and the individuals who are ghosted, believe it or not, are actually dealing with the same issues.
Like what?
Low self-esteem, really unsure about what they actually want in life. Never have they ever actually been taught how to talk about what they feel. So they are ghosting.
Wow. So they don't know how to manage their emotions.
They don't know. Let's talk about managing emotions. So managing emotions is one thing, Sunny. Understanding what a person's feeling, what they're feeling is the very first part of managing emotions. So if you don't even know what you're feeling and you don't know what you're thinking, how can you manage it? Right? So the ones who are being ghosted, they're dealing with like a dagger through the heart, right? They're feeling rejected. They're so confused, and they're already dealing with low self-esteem, and now the self-esteem is just got exponentially worse. But believe it or not, the ghosters are dealing with very similar issues.
Wow.
But they're just not openly talking about it.
So they're both feeling the same emotions, but they're not discussing it with each other.
They're not discussing it.
They're just walking away and dealing with it in the society.
Escapism. We're back to the escapism now. Substance use, Netflix, pornography, gambling, you name it. I'm going to escape. It's easier.
Even though it's probably actually harder.
100% it's harder. Because once you do that time and time again, so let's say a person starts with these types of habits, 21, 22, now I'm referring specifically to the ghosters. Okay. Now, if that person doesn't figure out what they want in life, what they want out of a partner, do they even want a partner?
Yep.
Actually, let me say that first. They don't figure out what they want. They're going to find themselves 35 and single and miserable. And then some of these people experience panic attacks. And then they look back on their life, if they look back on their life, and then they go, and then it hits them like, oh my gosh, I have created my own reality. What the hell did I do? And then they have to work through it, the layers. And that's where counseling again comes really in handy, right? But some of these people, 35, having panic attacks, anxiety attacks, like so confused about why they're feeling what they're feeling. If they're lucky enough to have the guidance, like you mentioned, maybe some good friends, good family, right? Or a therapist, they can figure out, oh, it's when I was 20. That's when this pattern started, right? And you can still change. 35 is not too late to change.
No.
35 is young.
It is.
Right? You can start making a change. You can shift.
Can you touch upon that? But you said that 35 is young, even 45.
100%.
Yeah. A lot of people put themselves in limitations. I hear that, with some peers of mine, maybe older.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't do this because I'm not there. I'm
Yeah.
not there yet. Or I'm this age now. It's like self-limiting. I mean, if you could touch upon that, you've probably seen a lot of people transform their lives.
You know what's coming to mind as you ask me that? Sunny, you're not going to even believe this, or maybe you will. It's, I have clients, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. Let's go in that range. Almost 80% of my clients that are in that age range are so hard on themselves. I'm talking like maybe they failed a semester or they took 1 year off. These youngins are talking as though their life is done. Okay, just to give you perspective, let's not even touch a 35, 40 yet. These are early 20-year-olds talking about how it's too late for them.
Wow.
Think about that. That literally tells us and shows us that these kids, I'm calling them kids, are experiencing way too much pressure. The pressure is on. And a lot of the reason why the pressure is on is because a lot of them don't think, and this is based off my experience working with these particular clients, they don't think that they're going to ever be able to afford a house.
Wow.
Here. They don't. So they feel like, here, I'll use an example. A student studying at SFU, doing a business degree, right, has all these aspirations and dreams, and then they realize, wait a minute, like when I graduate, I'm going to be barely making like maybe 90, like if I'm lucky, 80 maybe starting in whatever field that they're going to go into. And then they start doing the math, right? These are smart kids. Mm-hmm. And then they go, what's the point? Yeah. F it. I'm not going to be able to get anything. I can't do it. I can't obtain that. So a lot of these youngins, if they fall back or fall behind even just the slightest bit, they are defeated. They are so defeated by what's going on economically around us.
Wow.
And it's heartbreaking as a counselor. So I work on like uplifting them and telling them that there's nothing that they cannot accomplish. They can do it, and not to feel deterred, right? Just because X and Y.
So that's a really good point you made. Let's move that timeline 5 years forward.
Yes.
If these stress levels persist with young people, and 5 years from now, where do you see them being societal-wise?
That, the thought really scares me. Sunny, I was talking about this with my university, who I'm very much connected to because I'm on an exam panel there. And we were talking about how the stress levels that young students are experiencing and facing are so astronomical, and we're almost non-clinically comparing it to the stress of, like, say, a 30-something-year-old who's been working for about 5-6 years in like a high-stress environment. That level of stress is what these 20-something-year-old students are facing. So if we use that as a measurement tool, that's not good. Because by the time they actually get into their field of work, their level of stress is going to be through the roof, which means the likelihood that they're going to be using certain escapisms, like the few that I mentioned, is very high.
Wow. Medical conditions could be happening as well.
Yep. Heart problems, blood pressure. A lot of these young students are experiencing symptoms that they should not be experiencing, to be frank with you.
Wow.
Yeah, they shouldn't be.
That's, there's so many things we could talk about.
So
I just feel like we just scratched the surface today. And we're basically coming close to our end here for today's session.
Okay.
We're going to keep going longer, but for today's session, what kind of upcoming projects and ventures are you currently excited about, and how can people look out for you?
Well, if we're Sunny, you and I chatted during our phone conversation about transparency, honesty, and that sometimes we don't see it enough with people who seem to present themselves as, oh, they've made it, right? So I want to answer this question in a little bit of a different way.
Sure.
At this current time, I've actually decided to take 1 or 2 steps back, and I've decided to hit the pause button and focus on my well-being, my health, the 5 dimensions I mentioned, right? Physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, financial. And I've decided to focus on self-love, self-care, spending more time with my loved ones, because I was noticing that I was sacrificing those 5 dimensions of well-being because I was overworking. Okay? We do have some really cool things coming up, but I've hit the pause button because I have the rest of my life to accomplish it whenever I want. There's no rush. There's no race. So for now, I am continuing to see my clients who I love dearly. My practice location is downtown Vancouver on Homer and West Pender. I also do virtual work. And down the road, something that followers will see are new practitioners working under me. But for now, I'm focusing on myself so
That's awesome.
that I can restore.
It reminds me of a quote from a movie, The Pursuit of Happiness.
Great movie.
Phenomenal. Tears me up every time when it's at the end. But I mean, do you think the pursuit of happiness is a place or a feeling?
Oh, it's a feeling. It's a consistent feeling.
Right. So don't think that it's a race. Pursue the feeling.
Yes. And sometimes I talk about this with my clients as well, by comparing the North American success story is very linear, right? So there's a beginning and then there's an end. And I like to think, and I like to introduce this idea to circular living experience. So there is no beginning, there is no end. There is just feelings. There are just experiences.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Beautiful. How some ways people can connect with you online, social media website that you can share with?
Yeah, so we've got my Instagram, Wellness Talks. You can follow me there. And from the bio, I think it's called the bio section, you can click into my booking site, my website, read more about me there. There's certain publications I've been a part of and I've done as well. I wrote a thesis on the power of face-to-face and communal acts, which is very powerful.
Amazing. You know what, Esha, I for sure know there's so many more things we can talk about. We will have you on again. Guys, connect with Esha. Follow her online, Instagram, email her, and you guys can set up an appointment. Wealth of knowledge here and experience. So thank you again, Esha, for coming down today.
Thank you for having me, Sunny. This was great.
Absolutely. Thanks.